All right, Andre, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. First things first, how are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Can you give us a brief overview of Major Moment and your musical background?
Absolutely. So, Major Moment is a Boston-based rock band that combines not only influences from different cultures, but also people who, or their origins are from different cultures and different countries as well, like mine, for example. And, I'm from Russia originally. So is my wife, who is a female singer in the band as well. We have a drummer who was born in Venezuela and then moved to Guatemala and then moved to the States. So and a couple guys are born in America. So we're truly international blend
Very
here.
multicultural.
Yes, absolutely.
And well, what about yourself? How did you kind of get started in music?
Well, I was involved in different music-related activities since I was a young kid, I guess. Both of my parents finished music school. They didn't finish it, to have a career as a musician, but rather, as a pleasure, I guess, as a hobby
Yeah.
on a more professional level, if you know what I mean. So, and they both play instruments and they sing. So I was exposed to music from early age, starting, especially with my dad being a huge fan of like Western music, like the bands like the Beatles, for
Oh,
example.
okay,
So
yeah.
he's a huge Beatle maniac, and all classic rock stuff. And then I kind of got slowly. As I slowly became a fan of like more of an alternative style of music,
Yeah.
starting with probably like early 2000s, late 90s. I wasn't that much of a fan of like grunge movement at the time, but what became after that, like new metal, obviously bands like Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, Avril Lavigne was always one of my favorite ones. um, you know. And so, yeah, and it kind of became apparent that I wanted to do music on a different level. I didn't know what to do back then, and how am I gonna do back then? I was living in Russia, up until the age of 20, and so, I had this dream that, one day I might move to the States and, do something music-wise. And little did I know this dream would become true one day.
Yeah.
Uh, I started learning English when I was a little kid, right? And here we are talking about the video games, but actually, video games played a huge part in my life, because I started learning English more for myself and less as like, oh, you have to do it. You must learn a second language. It wasn't pushed on me. So, and I rather wanted to kind of discover new words, expand my vocabulary, and I was always a fan of like playing video games in the original language, which most of the time would be English. And since, we didn't have any professional Russian translations at the time, whatever the pirates could give us was
Yeah.
always like a lackluster quality. And I really hated that, to the extent where I would just like, okay, well, I might as well just, translate the game myself, like little by little, started picking up phrases here and there. Later it switched to movies. I was watching movies in the original language, even with subtitles to begin with, right? Because it's hard to pick up different accents and whatnot. And then it went to translating lyrics of the songs as well, of the bands that I really enjoyed.
So you already mentioned several bands that you basically grew up. Are they some of the major influences of the music of Major Movement?
Yeah, absolutely. So Linkin Park would be our biggest influence, I guess.
Okay.
I also wear this T-shirt of a little less known band called Poets of the Fall.
Okay.
And they are also an influence. They're a lesser known band in the States, but they're pretty big in Europe and in England. They have a big following. They're originally from Finland, I believe.
Okay.
And so they have to do they have something to do with the video games as well. So we're gonna have to talk about that later as well.
It's all linking in.
I know, right? I know, absolutely.
You've had an incredible level of success already, just reading through your accolades for the band. Is there any one particular thing that stands out the most for you, or something that makes you the most proud personally?
Well, out of those that we've already achieved, I guess. Well, we had won the Lennon Award for one of the songs.
Yep.
And since my dad was a huge Beatle maniac, and we actually traveled to Liverpool with my parents, and we went to John Lennon's house, the original house he lived in, which is now a national museum.
Yeah.
Right. We were so lucky to get, we literally got the last tickets to go in. And, that was a couple years before Major Moments started. So, to me, just comes a full circle, growing up listening to all those songs and, somebody who my dad adored, basically idolized, and, musically, from a personal standpoint, and, to be awarded, to be recognized by, such a huge name associated with that award. It really makes me so happy.
Yeah. It's incredible, yeah. So you cite video games, as you've mentioned already, as a major influence in your life, not just on your music. So
Definitely.
What is your earliest memories of gaming? When you try and think back and through the fuzz of life, what still stands out?
Well, I remember everything pretty clearly.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. I started, playing video games when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, maybe probably 7, right?
Yeah.
When I went to school, my dad bought me a clone of NES, as a gift, and it was a luxury gift at the time because very few kids in my school, had a console, at least back then,
Yeah.
I got stuck with that same console, and other kids got Sega and Super Nintendo, but I was the original owner of that NES clone, and I played through all of those games, and I have memories of exchanging those little cartridges that we had with my friends, and it was definitely a culture back then, but I'm so psyched about how much of a culture it became nowadays, because I don't want to take all the credit, but I kind of saw it coming. I kind of saw it becoming the new form of media, the new form of entertainment, on a bigger level, Hollywood level, and people were thinking this guy is insane, so what is he saying?
Yeah.
Right. Well, one of the first memories I probably would be grabbing a Russian English dictionary off the shelf and trying to translate some words in Castlevania. I clearly remember I tried to look up garlic.
Okay.
All the words. So, what else was there?
It's interesting to say Castlevania because it's the English translation itself wasn't that good.
Yeah. I had no idea back then, obviously, right? But later on, I caught up with all the jokes about it, and the other games as well. Yeah, absolutely. But it's weird that you're mentioning it because if the English translation from Japanese is not that great, but they had all the resources to do the proper translation, right? Can you imagine the Russian translations?
Oh wow! Yeah,
Oh boy, they were bad.
Oh, but it's still so Castlevania is kind of your, I guess, your go-to early one. Then if people point to you, go, well, what was the first game you ever played? And you think Castlevania, really, I guess.
Well, that's not definitely not the first game I played. I think the first ever game I played on NES was probably Kung Fu or whatever it was called. The game where, yeah, I think it was called Kung Fu, right?
Yeah.
Right. But before then, my father worked at the hospital, and like during some downtime, during some off hours, he would let me play, some video games that they have installed on their computers, work computers, because it was like such a huge deal. Like, oh my God, these games, like, have you seen those games? Like Wolfenstein 3D. And what else was there? Well, Doom was there, obviously, right? Prince of Persia was there. So that those DuckTales, and those are the only ones I remember from back then.
That's brilliant. I mean, I thought you were going to say things like Minesweeper or Solitaire, but you're
well, I don't
legit.
really consider them video games. Like I consider video games something that has like a little more going on than just like a card game.
Of course, but still, yeah, that's incredible. So where did you go from there? So NES, was it always a progression?
There was a little bit of I guess, kind of a stagnation going on for years and years, because I begged my parents to, buy me new consoles, right? Because they were constantly evolving, but they also were more expensive. And the classic excuse of any parent would be like, "Well, why do you need another one? You already have one, right?"
Yeah.
It's like try to explain the bits and 32 bits and 64 bits to somebody who's who is a doctor his whole life, right? So it's a little bit better, right? No, son, you already have one.
Yeah, it's always I completely relate to that. I grew up in a family with 7 others, so there was one console, that was it. And I love that you mentioned the bits, because it's something you forget, and generations that have come after both of us will never understand the days of the bit wars, where the 32, the 16, the 64, the 128, right. And then we all just forgot about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like right after, I think, Dreamcast, which is actually like a big milestone in my life. To rewind a little bit, so after NES, like I was visiting my friends who would have like Genesis, right, and Super Nintendo. We'd play Sonic and like Mortal Kombat and those kind of games, like classics, right. And then one of my buddies from school, he got somebody brought him a PlayStation 1 from Japan. Okay. Like that was like, nobody has ever heard anything about this system in our town. I'm not from Moscow. I'm from a smaller town, so it's like all of those little bits of information were so scarce. And he had a demo CD which had a demo of Resident Evil on, and everything was in Japanese, of course. He had no memory cards, so it was a lot of fun going through the same things over and over and over again, right? But I became such a huge fan of Resident Evil. Well, as you can tell, like I'm wearing the Star's hat right now. All right, so that's probably my favorite game of all times right now. And it all started back in, I guess, late 90s, right, when I visited this guy who was like, "Hey, you want to check out this thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." And little do I know, right?
I love
all of
that.
I'm so hooked on this, right?
Yeah, in your original email to us, you talked about PS1 changing your life, and again, it's a generational thing. The importance of that console on a certain age group and so on can't be understated. It changed everything, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It did change everything, and it brought games to a new level of entertainment that was really close to what you would call cinematic, especially with games like Metal Gear Solid, for example, right? And Final Fantasy, right? And Resident Evil. An incredible jump forward comparing to what was before that. Even N64 that I actually never played. Back in Russia, that was kind of an era that was missed. And I switched right to PS1. Well, I didn't have a PS1, right? I was visiting my friends to play PS1. But the next system that really changed my life was Dreamcast, because that's officially like the next system that I owned.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a long wait.
There's some big gaps there, and it's
a
interesting.
Big gap right there, right?
Yeah, because it's interesting, because the one you missed out as well, which from my side is kind of a big deal, is the Sega Saturn.
Oh yeah, that I completely missed out on that, completely.
Oh, it was probably for the best, considering it didn't exactly have a catalogue of famous games in the end. But I was lucky. I had an older brother who was working by the time the 32-bit consoles came around, so he was picking them up and playing them that way. And in England, PS1s, while they were expensive, you could then get what we called a chipped PlayStation.
Yes,
yeah, you know this. Okay.
Oh, of course I do know this. Yeah, I'm from Russia. Like, what do you think? Like, we would buy like official like licensed games, like that would cost like $60 or something. Like in Russian rubles, it would be like a crazy money. That would something that somebody would make in like 2 weeks or something. It's like ridiculous money. So nobody would ever spend that kind of money for any games. Like to buy a console, like that was the big deal. Games you would like, okay, well now I can kind of breathe a little bit. But to save up to buy a console was a big deal for sure. But yeah, absolutely everything was chipped. Like every single system I owned was chipped. So we just didn't have any alternatives, not because, we were bad guys or like we didn't want to support developers or anything, just so is life, right?
That's the thing. It's one of those where it was of a time. It's not something that happens nowadays. You're not doing that with your Xbox or your PlayStation 4 or anything like that. You can't.
No. Right.
So from that era then, sticking to the important eras for you, the PlayStation, the Dreamcast, what were some of the games from those? You've already mentioned Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid, but what else around, particularly the Dreamcast, because you haven't said anything about that really were important to you?
Right, absolutely. So this is actually a very interesting point in my life and in my career, I guess, that would later become a career, right? This is the place where games started intersecting with music somehow. Okay. Starting with probably, well, I actually have something to show you guys. Starting with this thing right here.
Tony Hawk's.
Does that look familiar to you?
It does. It's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, eh?
Right. That game definitely introduced me to a lot of punk, a lot of rock bands. Like it has Rage Against the Machine, it has Papa Roach, it has Powerman 5000.
Of course. Like
you name it. It's just the soundtrack is like phenomenal in itself. It's like classics right now, and all those bands and the game. I played countless hours. Like I unlocked all the secrets, like all the areas, all the arenas. All the tricks. Me and my buddies would get together, play like a competition style, I guess you would call it, so that was one of them. Another game worth mentioning was this gem that not everybody's familiar with this, surprisingly, right? But this is such a great game. The soundtrack, I actually own 2 versions of the soundtrack on CDs. I don't know why. I don't know why I needed, but I felt like I did.
It's different covers, so that's a good reason.
Right. And I love the soundtrack to this game so much. And it's mostly Japanese DJs, right?
Yeah.
But it also, in American version, it had an edition of Rob Zombie's Dragula. Right, and Cold's Just Got Wicked, which is super interesting. Why did they include those 2 bands? But this is how I found out about Cold. And the interesting fact about this band is, like, I actually have a huge history about, like, a lot of stories about this band. I own a piano that was owned by Scooter Ward, from the vocalist from Cold. Their drummer Sam did custom paintings for me, so I'm like a huge fan. And it all started with the video game.
Oh wow, that's an incredible connection. Almost doesn't make sense how you get from that to this, particularly with just the soundtrack.
Right. Like I didn't have any idea, but like I loved the song so much, it pushed me to go online, like at early stages of like dial-up internet in Russia, and look up, okay, where can I download like a Russian version of like Napster at the time, right? Where can I download like Cold albums and whatnot, right? And so I started listening to that band, right? Like little did I know, I mean, I'm actually. We are opening for them. We are sharing the stage with them in April here in Rhode Island, which is a crazy big deal to me.
Yeah, that's got to feel great.
Yeah, absolutely. They were featured in another video game on PS2 as well. I think it's called PsyOps.
Oh, I think I've heard of that.
Mindgate Conspiracy, something like that. Yeah. So they had a song and a music video done for this game. What else can I mention? Well, obviously, I cannot not mention this game right here, right?
Well, of course.
Right. And yeah, that was just like another dimension of everything, just another dimension of entertainment, video gaming, and like I would invite my parents, like I would be like, I don't know, 16, 17, I would call my parents like, look at this. They would not understand what's going on the screen because everything was in English, right? Like most of it, but like they were like, wow, this graphics is like something. This is like
because you are talking with Shenmue, you're talking at the time an incredible step up above anything that had been seen at that stage on a home console.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so from this video game, I also have a bunch of stories about this game, right?
Please tell, yeah.
So like I guess the biggest thing is that I was lucky enough to meet with Yu Suzuki in San Francisco, and we had a dinner as a part of their Shenmue 3 Kickstarter campaign. That was probably 4 years ago or something. And I supported the project, and one of the packages was you would get to meet up with Yu Suzuki, and you'd get to chat, and like he would give you some cool bonuses like an artwork that was signed, and like stuff like that. And Shenmue 3 is now out, right? Did you have a chance to play it?
I have not played Shenmue 3 yet. No PS4 in my household. Because it's an exclusive, of course, to that. It's almost hard to believe, if that makes sense. So
absolutely does, yeah.
Yeah. As a person, again, like you, Shenmue, Dreamcast, incredibly life-changing. Shenmue 2, another incredible experience. And generally never thought in a million years this would happen. But truth be told, the pre-stuff that came, the trailers and all that, were very underwhelming. Like, for what I was... I don't know... It's hard to even say what did I expect. It was something that should never have happened.
I think I feel you on this one. I think we feel alike as far as that goes, because like we both understand and understood the importance and the groundbreaking results that Shenmue original one and the second one brought up, and how they changed the whole industry around, right? So we expected, I guess, in a way that the third installment would do something along those lines as well, right? Like make it a new dimension of something, right? And that never happened, of course, but I guess the creators decided to go, back to the origins, and just as time just didn't go by, if nothing has happened, and. I guess if we still had Dreamcast around, that would kind of make sense.
Yeah. It's kind of like you said. It's all good and proper being groundbreaking at a time when when nothing else was like that. Whereas modern gaming, the modern games we get, there's so much that's gone above and beyond that. I don't know. Shenmue 3 couldn't really have done anything in regards to, at least how I see it.
Yeah, I finished it a couple of weeks ago, actually. I didn't just sit down and play throughout the whole game. Like I decided to take little breaks here and there to see how the progression happens, right? But I guess the biggest problem I have with this game is the story just does not develop all that much at all. Like, as much as I hoped for. We're basically running around for, I don't know, 25, 30 hours, doing some, pretty boring, pretty useless stuff here and there, Feels like we're just wasting our time, you know what I mean?
Yep.
I was hoping for like a big story change, like a big development in the story.
Yeah, a significant shift that feels
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you are still playing games now, then, on modern consoles. You're not solely focused on nostalgia.
I am definitely kind of much less than in the past years, just because now more focusing on the music business and all aspects of that, which is which is unfortunate that I don't have that much time to play some video games, because right now there are some wonderful games are out.
Course, yeah.
Like me and my wife sat down and played through like first 20 minutes of Death Stranding, right?
Okay.
And that's just everything is so cinematic. Like Kojima is obviously a genius, whether he's in Konami or not in Konami, right? And I've been following his work like since Metal Gear Solid came out, right, on PS1.
Yeah.
And through all of the games he was involved in. And one of our favorite bands now, which is Bring the Horizon, got to do a song as a soundtrack for Death Stranding as well, which is super cool. Which is another intersection for video games and music, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, music and video, as you said already, it's become such a cinematic experience on level with Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
So this no longer seems like such a strange thing. I mean, I wasn't actually aware that Bring Me the Horizon had done a song of Death Stranding. You saying it doesn't shock me. I'm just like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
But I watched some of their interviews and like how they met with Hideo Kojima, and for them it was also such a big deal, like because they also are huge fans of original Metal Gear Solid, like. One of their songs is called what is it? Shadow Moses, right? So that tells you something.
It's a pretty obvious link.
Right. And that would be an amazing experience for our band to also be included in a video game at some point in our career. That would be a huge milestone. We kind of were included in part of that Shenmue 3 thing. A quote from one of our songs is written in the guest book and in the hotel. So that is a cool Easter egg. And we obviously are named a special sponsor in credits, and there's even a picture of me there on the Wall of Fame, I guess, in one of the dojos. So that's cool, right? We kind of faked our way in video game world, right?
It's a start.
It is a start for sure, right? And it's like some people freak out when they tell them this. Like they're like, "Oh my God, it's such a huge deal!" Like, man, how did it happen? It is a cool story, right? But one of my goals, I guess, is to write a song specific to a video game. That would be super cool. I feel like I can definitely bring some experience to the table. Maybe to one of Resident Evil upcoming games. Who knows? I would love to do that.
Yeah, because you start automatically thinking, well, what kind of game would fit and what would work, but you'd be amazed how easily it would.
Right. Well,
So,
this band, Poets of the Fall, right? The T-shirt I'm wearing, their whole career just skyrocketed after their song "Late Goodbye" was the main theme of Max Payne 2, and that basically became the start of their careers. You know.
oh really? Okay.
And I became a fan since that game. Since I heard that song, I was instantly online searching for that band's name. You know, like looking up their albums. I think they didn't even have an album back then, and they came out with their debut album a couple months later. And you know, ever since I've listened to all of those albums. And like they're great guys. I've been to their show. You know, an amazing band.
So is that kind of the music you do like in video games? Do you prefer to hear artist songs, or is there particular game soundtracks, original scores and stuff that you would highlight and go, that stuff is just amazing?
Well, both actually. Something that instantly comes to mind is I have a collection of Silent Hill soundtracks over there.
Okay, yeah.
So that obviously Final Fantasy games were notoriously, big for soundtracks. Those soundtracks from Final Fantasy 7, 8, 10, like they're classics, right?
I'm shocked. I've got to say, you just skipped one. You skipped 9. No way.
You know what? The thing is, like, I was never a fan of like disproportional bodies in video games. Like, to me, it meant, like I said, it was something more than just games. To me, it had to be real, so I would buy it.
Oh.
So even Final Fantasy 7, like, I didn't finish that one. Like, I didn't play a lot. Like, I started a little bit, but it felt weird. Like, I finished 8 and 10. Probably a couple times, which are like not considered the greatest games of Final Fantasy world. Surprisingly, right? Like I'm such an oddball.
No, that's fascinating because for me it's the other way around.
I know.
Interest in Final Fantasy has always been the more fantasy-based stuff. That's why, like for me, 9 is my favorite one of all of them, even over 7, which is obviously tends to be considered the greatest of the great. But your how you describe what your taste is, I picture 10, I picture 8. It all makes sense. So does that mean even with the more modern stuff, you're more interested in that side of Final Fantasy?
Yeah, absolutely. And like obviously, Kingdom Hearts, I love that game. I think I finished the first one. I don't think I played the second one, and I definitely did not play the third one yet.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to that. Soundtrack from Kingdom Hearts obviously comes to mind. What other games can I think of? Oh man, well, Resident Evil. I always loved the, the daunting, dark themes. A lot of orchestration. Strings there. The save
iconic stuff.
Yeah, save room piano themes. Wonderful stuff for sure. Well, help me out. Which ones did you like?
Oh, it's you've already named some of the ones that kind of stick out. I mean, you talk about Resident Evil, but so Capcom or whoever the composer was during a period of time. So Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, 4. Dino Crisis, they were able to put together not just in-game incredible music, but one of the things I always noticed was the end credits. The end credits themes of many of them. Resident Evil 1 had this very rocked up guitar-driven thing. And some of them, like Resident Evil 3, Nemesis, was a piano melody.
Right.
And this stuff stuck with me for my life, that they were so good at this. And that also, they were putting this much effort into an end credit song. Like, okay, well, you're at the end of the game, does it really matter?
Right, exactly.
We want you to remember.
Right the end, that's it.
Yeah. Just that stuff. And you mentioned Silent Hill soundtracks, and Silent Hill 2 in particular.
Absolutely, that's one of my favorites for sure. Yeah. Laura's theme, that's just brilliant stuff. Yeah.
And it's a funny thing, I didn't play Silent Hill 2 until about 5 years ago. There's a big period, similar to you in a way. There's a period of my life where video games just didn't happen for whatever reason, and it's about a year into the PS2, and not until the first year of the Xbox 360. That gap there, so yeah, so a lot of things kind of just passed me by. But modern stuff as well, like modern soundtracks. I don't know if you know of a game called Thomas Was Alone.
I heard of it. I heard of it.
It's like the last couple of years, it's probably the most minimalistic game that's ever had such an impression on me.
Right.
The composer, David Housden, he does incredible work. Yeah. So, would you consider yourself more of a nostalgic gamer in regards to that? Like, if you were going to sit down and you've got a couple of hours to spare where there's nothing going on and you can play a game, are you more likely to put on an old game or something more modern?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a tricky one. I don't know, because I might do either. To be honest, to be completely honest, it's a gamble. Like, whatever mood I'm in, I guess, there's an equal chance of me dusting off Dreamcast, and putting Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 in there, right? Then, just browsing through PlayStation Store and finding, oh, I've heard of this game. I definitely need to download it. Yeah, by the way, going back to that band again, right? It's not like they paid me to promote them or anything. Besides Max Payne 2, they were also in Alan Wake, right? Which was a great game. Like, they're buddies with Remedy. And a new game came out, and I haven't had a chance to play it yet, called Control. And they wrote a song specifically for that one as well. So Control would probably be one of those games that I would definitely download and play from the new ones. Well, I finished Resident Evil 2 Remake. Obviously, I had to, save some time for that. It also took me like 2 weeks or something to finish one campaign, just because like I was, so short on time, on free time. It's like playing 20 minutes here and there, but it's everything that I dreamt of, I guess. It's everything that I imagined back in 1998, like that's exactly how it would look like to me, looking at those pixels and polygons, and like, oh, I see a real person there. Like, I see, something more behind it.
It's certainly set the bar for remakes now, hasn't it?
Oh yeah. The 3 is coming. Nemesis is coming up. Right, that's in April 3rd, I believe, which is like right around the corner.
Yeah.
And heard rumors of Dino Crisis making a return as well.
Yep, that is supposed to be the rumor. Those rumors drive me crazy. The latest one I read last week was that I can't remember who it was, but Skies. Do you know Skies of Arcadia?
Of course, yes, I did finish that one.
Yeah, so Skies of Arcadia would be the next one to apparently get the remake treatment from the Dreamcast, and it's kind of like, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yep, absolutely. There were rumors of so many remakes, and like so many did not happen. Just you never know what to believe.
No, absolutely.
You know what? Another game I just remembered about, like, since it seems like both of us are like heavily invested in horror games,
yes.
Right? A Clock Tower. That was a gem of a game. I don't know if you played it or not.
It rings a bell. I can't remember. My earliest sort of horror game thing is Manic Mansion, although that was more of on the NES. I think that was
right.
Yeah, it's more of a point and click. Lucas Arts
thing. That's very similar actually to that game. It's also a point and click, and it's based around the story about a maniac with giant pair of scissors, believe it or not. And so so you gotta run from this guy for your life. Very interesting game. Very different from Resident Evil. Mm-hmm. So check it out when you have a chance. I'm sure you're gonna like it. Definitely has its own style. It has this, raw Japanese horror style, like the original like Ring movie, for example, right?
Yeah.
Movie. Yeah.
So why do you game? Is it like stress relief, relaxation, or something else?
It's everything, to be honest with you. It's like such a part of my life at this point. Uh, it's just like, why do people watch movies? Well, it's everything, right? So it's a form of entertainment. Like, you go there to kind of, let your mind to rest a little bit. Not to worry about your daily stuff and get submerged into this fantasy world or whatnot, or just become a part, feel yourself a part, a character in somebody else's life,
Yeah.
right? Because we always associate ourselves one way or another with what's going on the screen, right? Whether it's a movie or a video game. With the plus, I guess the good side about video games, you can actually take control of the character, and you kind of can direct the movie yourself, like which way you want to go. So it's everything: exploration of different themes, inspiration. Like one song of ours was kind of inspired by a movie, Interstellar, and its soundtrack, orchestration of one of our songs in particular. And I kind of wanted that feel to the song as well. And so, if I wanted to get inspired or write a song that is similar in a way to the feel that I feel, to the way I feel about things when I play like Resident Evil or Final Fantasy, I would definitely just, start playing those games again and, get invested in them emotionally and see what that brings me.
Okay. That's yeah. I mean, I think particularly more than now than any day, everyone gets something different from it. Do you consider it an art form? It's a debate that's been raging for many years now. Is gaming an art form or not? What's your thoughts?
It's interesting that you brought it up, because back in college, and I studied law in Russia for 4 years. Believe it or not, right? Another odd fact about me. So there's a subject called rhetorics, right? And so we had to write a paper about any subject whatsoever that would be kind of controversial. So I wrote a paper that was basically called something along the lines of video games, a waste of time or a new form of entertainment.
Okay.
And so, I was trying to make a point that video games are becoming such an art form that they are now competing with Hollywood movies and the best written books, the classics, because the amount of detail that goes into creating those worlds is just like beyond belief. Like if you go and read the script of any video game, any modern video game, like starting from, like, I don't know, PlayStation 1 or 2 era. Like if you try to download a script to Metal Gear Solid 1, right, it'll be probably as big as any Hollywood movie script, right? If not bigger than that, right? Like with all the details and all the characters and all the specifics about that. So, and that paper, I wrote that paper when I think it was in probably 2003, 4. So it was like PlayStation 2 era already. So I was definitely onto something here, Like I was definitely not crazy, And games like, well, Metal Gear Solid 2 came out, right? Like I played through Final Fantasy X. It was a great game to me, very inspirational, love story, Another one that comes to mind is Fahrenheit, or it was called Indigo Prophecy as well.
Okay.
So that game. That game is by a creator who later did Heavy Rain, whose name escapes me at the moment, who's a French game designer. And so Indigo Prophecy or Fahrenheit, I guess the name depended on the market, whether you were like from Europe or American. Like they decided to go just like with Resident Evil Biohazard.
Of course,
to avoid some legal issues or something, right? So that game featured soundtrack by Theory of a Deadman that I also got into after the game. Like I kind of dislike their later albums, but that album that the songs were from
Okay.
really is a good album. You know, I really like that one.
So, if you could make a sequel to any standalone game that you've played in the past, what would you choose?
Well, I already chose that. That was Shenmue 3. Right? I kind of wish that they did the sequel in the way that I imagined it, right? But that did not happen.
So think of
let
a
me
ga-
think.
Yeah, it's a bit of a stumper. One game that. Just one game that's never had a sequel. It's actually really hard. When I wrote it down, I was like, I can't even think of one. Because most games get sequels.
I love those questions, right? Most of them do, especially successful ones. And you mean like the game that has never had sequels, or
Yeah. Just one that's never had a sequel. A standalone game was a one-time only thing.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, if it comes to mind, we'll come back to it. What about then this
Right.
one? If you could scrub any game from your memory so that you could play it again with fresh eyes, what would you choose? I have a funny feeling I know the answer. Bear in mind, we've been talking for nearly 50 minutes, but, you know,
Okay.
you give it.
Go ahead, surprise me.
I'd imagine it might be Resident Evil.
That is true. Actually, I think in a way that did happen, because it's almost as if Resident Evil 2 original was scrapped from my memory, right, when I played the remake. And, you know, I kind of got to relive all of that in a very new way, you know.
Well, I got to jump in and ask that. So then, when did you play? Did you play the Resident Evil original remake that was released on the GameCube, and then
of
later
course,
on?
yeah.
Oh
yeah.
How did you find that difference? Because again, that's a massive
Yes.
change.
It is a massive change, and I loved it. You know, I loved it. And that was actually the first system after Dreamcast that I bought. Oh no, I had a PS2 after Dreamcast. So after PS2, on my first trip to the States, which was in 2005, I bought GameCube at GameStop. Right, and I bought Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 1, and Resident Evil 4, of course, and the Metal Gear Solid remake as well.
Of course.
So, right, so that one was great, right? And I played through all of them, and I loved those games, you know, like I just couldn't get enough, and the graphics were so, you know, freaking amazing, especially on the remakes on the remake of Resident Evil. Just, you know, mind-blowing what they were able to accomplish.
Yeah, it's like, to me, it's before Resident Evil 2 remake, it was the epitome of what a great remake was. But I got to go back to now. You've just reminded me, and it's funny enough. About a month ago, I was talking to my brother about it. Why is it, do you think, right, that so everyone acknowledges the Resident Evil remake, fantastic, but no one ever mentions the Metal Gear remake? Why on earth is that?
Your guess is as good as mine, my friend. Like, honestly, I think it's a great remake.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe, you know what, like, maybe it was a little bit too close to the original, like very close to the original. It was almost like the scenes were also shot with the same angles as well. Like, they literally tried to go more for like a high-end remaster than a remake, I think. You know, that would be my guess. Because with original, with Resident Evil remake, there were quite significant changes there. They were added, like an added extra boss and an added enemies, and they
New locations, yeah.
New locations, Crimson Head zombies, right? That you had to burn. Like they had the whole. Basically, they had 70% of a new game. You know, they just left the core idea of Resident Evil and kind of played around with it, just like did a remix on that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With Metal Gear Solid, I feel like it was very close to the original. Yeah.
I think
which
you nailed it.
Not to say that it was a badly done remake. You know, I loved it. You know, and I'd play it tonight if I could, if I had a GameCube, I guess.
So, continuing the sort of theme about what you like and what you don't like, what about, is there a specific genre, a type of game that you just can't really get on with, that you just don't really like playing?
Yes. There's a few actually. I'm not huge into role-playing games, aside from probably Final Fantasy and like I mentioned, Skies of Arcadia, right? It just I get easily lost in like the world is like so much bigger than me. Like where do I even start to explore, right? Like it feels like those kind of games they require a much heavier investment emotionally and a lot of time on your
Okay.
hand because they tend to, if like we're talking about single player games, right, like an action adventure game, uh, a single player campaign could be like 20-30 hours, right? Something like a role playing game could be like 100 plus
Easily,
easily,
yeah.
right? So was never into those kind of games. What else? I don't know, like golf. Yes, like or pool pool simulators. I don't know, maybe not my thing. I'm actually talking to you as I'm sitting in front of a real life pool table right here.
Okay.
Yes,
It's a bit different to having pool at home to playing it in a game.
right. Like, why would I do that, right?
No, I know.
Um, I don't know what kind of games are you not into?
Well, mostly racing, I think. Most racing games, I find myself getting fairly turned off by that stuff. Um, and the only ones I do enjoy are the ones that are more on the cartoon games and things like that. Your Mario
Mm-hmm.
Karts and stuff like
Gotcha.
that.
Yeah.
I've got a Nintendo Switch and I love it. It's a lovely little machine. But
Right.
going back to the PS1, where everyone was going nuts for Gran Turismo
Right.
and what's it called? Ridge Racer. I
Right.
just couldn't enjoy them. I don't. I'm not. I've never had an interest in cars. So the idea of driving a car that's realistic and stuff like that just isn't really
Mm-hmm.
for me at all. Let me throw banana skin. That's much more fun.
That's hilarious. Now, for me, it was a little bit different, I guess, when it comes to racing games, specifically like Gran Turismo was, kind of a big deal, when it came out, especially on PS2. That was like one of the most realistic looking driving games ever. So I would just like put it on the demo mode and just sit and watch. It's like, wow, this is so cool. But I was never like into racing or like all that much, but some games like Need for Speed, for example,
Yeah.
right? Like what was it? Underground had a phenomenal soundtrack as well. Gran Turismo had a cool intro soundtrack. What was the band? My favorite game, right? Was it not Cranberries? I think it was. What was it? Garbage, right?
Garbage. Okay. Yeah. Shirley
I think
Manson.
so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And later on, I got into on Dreamcast. There was a game called Metropolis Street Racing that
Okay.
later became Project Gotham on Xbox, and later on that
Yes.
became Forza Motorsport.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, so those games kind of I hold dear to my heart, especially like Project Gotham Racing. Like they had an incredible like radio thing going. That was one of the first games, I guess, aside from GTA, that had like its own radio. And like what's really important to me, that some of Russian artists were in the game, like officially. Like there was I guess, a track that was like a racing track that was happening in St. Petersburg or Moscow. I don't exactly remember which city it was, but like there was a Russian radio, and it was like, wow, what's going on? Like it's a Russian radio in an American game. It's like crazy.
Yeah.
So it mattered to me all that much.
Yeah, kind of at that stage, the Cold War's done, the Iron Curtain's down, everyone's getting along now. We can have the music.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, again, sticking to the theme of what we've been doing here, what about a remake then? What game that hasn't been done yet that
Uh-huh.
you adore would you love to see we're talking full-on remake here as well, not a remaster?
Oh, okay. Oh, now we're talking about the remake, right? Okay. So that could be easier because that game, Clock Tower, I think I would love to see a remake of that because it definitely had a lot of potential. It was poorly done on PS1 on such a low budget. but I feel like the atmosphere was what was holding it all together. And that to me is very important. Um, I guess it was kind of boring to say things like Silent Hill 2 because it still holds up to pretty well.
Yeah.
Even by today's standards, it's a well-looking video game. Um, yeah.
Still.
So I think we probably have to go back to PlayStation 1 era. Well, Final Fantasy VII gets a remake, right?
Yep.
So now I have to ask for Final Fantasy VIII remake as well, because that was one of my probably never going to happen, though, because that was not a well-received game by fans. Neither was 10. So two of my favorite games in the series, probably never going to see the remakes of them. Probably never going to see the light of day.
Oh, I'd be amazed. Particularly, I'd see them doing 10 more than they would 8.
Yeah.
But even that seems impossible.
Yeah, it seems impossible to me. Yeah.
Maybe another 20 years down the line
20
when
years,
it's become
could be.
nostalgic.
Right.
So how do you feel? This is a broad question, but see how you do with it. How do you feel about the current state of gaming and the issues that are kind of arising and are becoming more public, be it loot boxes, gambling, the mobile market, and so on?
Right. I'm kind of not a huge fan of those ways to milk the gamer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We didn't have any of that back in PlayStation, Dreamcast era, right?
No.
Games could not have been patched to begin with, right? You download the game right now, right? Instantly there's a patch available, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like developers try to push the game out so fast that they almost half-ass some of the things, in just because they can't patch it later, fix it later. Let gamers play for a couple of weeks and complain to us in forums, and then we're gonna read and kind of have a expanded quality assurance team. They're beta testers, right? Who's now gamers.
Yeah.
But I don't normally purchase a lot of DLCs and whatnot, right? I guess the last game I was kind of heavy on DLC purchases was Rocksmith.
Oh, right.
And that was way before Major Moment as well. So that was the origin of me rocking the guitar, I guess, learning to play guitar. It was a fun game.
Yeah.
I really, really loved and appreciated the idea that it's kind of a hybrid of a learning experience of a real instrument. You're not making a fool of yourself playing 5 color buttons and
Guitar Hero,
on Guitar Hero. Nothing against that. I've done that. It's fun for fun, but if you I always wanted something more, and Rocksmith was exactly what I wanted. Such a great experience. You plug in your guitar to a video game. How crazy is that? It's insane. And you can learn all the songs that you want, as in a game format. This is definitely a new way of learning experiences, and I wish there's more of that. Not sure how popular those games are nowadays. I haven't heard anything about Rocksmith since the last game that came out in 2014, I believe.
Yeah, it was that oversaturation where there was just so many of them in a short amount of time. Blame Guitar Hero for that. It was so many, and then they were doing individual ones: Guitar Hero, Metallica, Guitar Hero, Van Halen.
The Beatles. Yeah.
I think Rocksmith maybe just came at a bad time when that.
Absolutely.
Was just too much, because there was another one. Oh, Rock Band. That was it. Yeah,
Rock Band. Yeah, for sure. Right. But I felt Rocksmith was definitely a step forward comparing to those games, because it allowed for, and I did play. I had an electric drum set that I could connect to my Xbox and play Rock Band, and I played a couple Green Day songs. I learned a couple Green Day songs on my real drum set that I could probably still play today.
Okay.
I still remember how it goes. And it was fun. Definitely the learning curve becomes so much smoother like to get familiar with the instrument
Yeah.
than just sitting in front of a book, for example, trying to figure out all the scales and all of that, right?
Hopefully, if it did that, not just for you, but for others as well, and encouraged people who had never thought about it before to pick up a guitar or hit the drums, then I guess it did something good.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about mobile games? Do you play much?
Oh, not at all. I think the only games aside from Angry Birds, right, or like later Flappy Bird or whatever, that I just downloaded it for fun, right? But some people get really like obsessed with those games, right?
Yeah.
And Angry Birds became like a phenomenon, right? Like that is like a multi-million-dollar industry, like plush toys, like licensed everything. It's crazy to think, and it still happens to this day. Like the games are, I don't know, over 10 years old, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It still lives on. But the majority of the games I have on my iPhone right now, and mind you, I don't play them. They're like the old school games. They're like Tony Hawk, Jet Set Radio, like all of those games, you know.
Perfect place for it. The fact they're even available on your phone is incredible.
Right, that's crazy. That's crazy to think. Yeah, but like one of my buddies, he has an Android phone, so he's all set for retro gaming, right? He gets all sorts of emulation going, Dreamcast, even PlayStation, you know, like all the games. He sends me screenshots once in a while, like, hey, check this out. Like, this is so cool. Like I'm playing this old school game that we played together on my phone, you know, just incredible.
So we're going to wrap up now, and I guess it's a really straightforward one in the sense that just a kid comes up to you and they basically want you to give them a brief overview of the history of gaming within a couple of physical copies that you can give them. So you've got just five games across the entire history of your life that you could choose and go, okay, young kid, here's what you should play.
Well, see the thing about this, which is tricky, and we have to dedicate a couple minutes discussing this, is if I give them something that it's so outdated that it kind of becomes unattractive to them. You know,
Let's remove that. Let's remove that issue. Let's do the presumption that every game you choose will have some appeal. It's not about age or graphical capability or that.
Okay, 5 games. Wow, man. Seriously though? Oh, 5 games. Yeah, it would be probably closer to 10 or 20, but let's think of 5. Well, obviously Resident Evil. Well, I'd probably place Resident Evil 2 there. Final Fantasy X.
Cool.
So that's 2.
Yep.
All right. Well, just for the sake of it, Rocksmith.
Okay,
That would be 3. Because, you know, that's more than a game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's already some nice variety.
Right. Shenmue would be 4. Well, I guess. Well, I guess Jet Grind Radio or Jet Set Radio, right? Yeah, that is definitely something else. You know, it's like a mix of what you love about anime and what you love about comics and what you love about adventure games and what you love about sports games as well and what you love about music. So to me, that kind of makes sense. You know, it's very basic starter pack.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very basic starter pack. Like I would definitely, you know, expand and start all the way back from Tetris or something, you know, to, you know, if I wanted to go all the way on the memory lane adventure trip.
Yeah, we'd be going all the way back to hit what would you'd have. Oh, you haven't got a Mario game a day. You don't have a Sonic game. It is a wide and open field. It's just a variation on that. Oh, someone asks you what metal means. Give the person 3 albums, and you're supposed to come with 3 albums to sum up the entirety of metal.
That. Yeah, it's impossible. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up with a last one then, which is basically what does the rest of 2020 look like for Major Moment? What big plans do you have in the work?
All right. Well, I'll start with saying that I'm looking forward to a couple games to play,
Great.
which would be Resident Evil 3 and it would be The Last of Us Part 2, which is also one of my favorite games of all time, right?
I've been admiring that. It was very pretty.
Yeah, and thank you. That was a special gift from one of my friends. He ordered from somebody who custom made it themselves, so it's not like a factory made thing. Like,
Incredible.
really wanted to show it off. As far as the band goes, we're probably, I would say, wrapping up our work on 4 new singles. That I'm very excited about. They're very much different from what we've done in the past, and evolution is what I always wanted for myself, for music, for video games, for everything. We just released a brand new music video, so check it out. It's out there on YouTube. It's called May Leave Scars. We are working on new music videos. We are playing a festival later this summer, and one of the bands from from this soundtrack, naming specifically Powerman 5000, is actually going to be sharing the stage with us, which is crazy, right? We are sharing the stage with Cold in a couple months, so we're playing some shows. I don't know. I would love to explore a possibility of getting some of our songs in one of the video games I love and adore. Maybe this year it was Bring Me the Horizon. Maybe next year it's going to be Major Moment.
Yes. And I guess as well, you'd also, if the opportunity arose, probably like to stretch your legs in and around Europe, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just the opportunity arises, okay?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you gotta dream about it for it to happen. This is yeah, absolutely. This is the story of my life. If I wasn't a dreamer back when I was playing NES, I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
It's incredible. Andrey, thank you very, very much for
Carl, it was such a
time.
pleasure. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you having me.
Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon and help us out over there. That's patreon.com/GBHBL, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?